ng blood supply. Siyempre, kung walang blood, hindi mabubuhay yung spinal cord. So, dito sa intervertebral foramen, dito dumadaan ang two vertebral arteries natin. And then the vertebral arteries merge into what is this artery? The basilar artery. So, apart from that basilar artery, meron siyang one connection here in front which goes through the anterior spinal fissure, above the anterior spinal fissure as the anterior spinal artery. But apart from the anterior spinal artery, di ba tatlo ang blood supply sa cervical areas. So, which is seen as the anterior spinal artery and the two posterior lateral arteries. And important dito, yung anterior spinal artery, meron siyang blood vessels going paloob called the anterior sulcal artery, and then going outside as the corona, which connects to the posterior lateral artery. And next, one problem of this system is that at the level of T4 to T9, mahina yung blood supply compared to the cervical area. So meron mga watershed areas at T4 to T9, which kapag may infection, mahirap mag-heal. So ang ginagawa ng ating blood ng ating katawan para ma-supplyan yung the rest of the spinal cord is through the radicular arteries from below. So ang pinaka-importante dyan is the great artery of Adam-Kivitz at the level of T9 to T12. It usually occurs in that area. So comes from below, and at 75% it occurs at T9 to T12. So important yun kasi ma-excise na yung artery na yun, parang increase na yung paraplegia ng person, parang talagang may injury na siya. So kung sa veins naman, makikita natin na may 3 anterior veins at 3 posterior veins. However, yung important dun is that they form a plexus, which is very important in cancer or in infections such as in TB and pus disease. So dahil dun sa increased venous sa plexus na yun, that is important yun kasi valveless. Parang cancer cells or mycobacteria can easily pass through and lodge into the vertebral columns, causing the aforementioned problems. So, ang next naman na i-discuss natin, yung coverings of the spinal cord, which is 3. Pia mater, arachnoid mater, and the dura mater. Yung pia mater, yung naka-attach directly sa spinal cord, and important yung pia mater kasi meron din mga dentate ligaments here, triangular ligaments attaching to the dura mater. And then meron tayong subarachnoid space containing large amounts of blood vessels, and then it's covered by a mesh, the arachnoid mater, and then the dura mater. So we'll go on to our review.
Now for the spinal cord proper. So the spinal cord has 31 pairs of spinal nerves, so 8 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral, and 1 coccygeal. So mga important highlights lang. So cervical enlargement, yung nasusupply sa upper limbs mo kasi doon galing yung anterior ramus ng brachial plexus. Yung lumbar enlargement mo from T11 to S1 naman, siya yung nasusupply sa lower limbs mo kasi doon galing yung anterior ramus ng sacral and lumbar plexus mo. So just take note of the conus medullaris from S2 to S4, cauda equina L2 to S5, and filum terminalis. So for the cross-section of the spinal cord naman, just take note of some parts. So anterior median fissure, it contains the anterior spinal artery. So we have the posterior median sulcus, posterior lateral sulcus, anterolateral sulcus, and the posterior intermediate sulcus na found lang sa cervical and the upper thoracic segments ng cord. So for the gray matter, the butterfly shape there. So yung tatandaan mo lang sa posterior dorsal horn, dun yung sensory neurons mo. So tapos sa anterior ventral horn naman, more of the motor cells, yung mga motor cells mo. And then lateral horn, greco-major, and the central canal, which is continuous with your fourth ventricle. So lamina of Rex, just take note sa lamina 2, nagko-contain siya ng substantia gelatinosa prolando, which is involved in pain and temperature. And for the white matter naman, so divided lang siya to 3 columns, so dorsal column, ventral column, and lateral column. So 3 pathways na na-mention is yung dorsal column, medial lemniscal pathway, just remember na itong dorsal column pathway is a sensory pathway. So, ito yung dorsal column, diba? So, yung dorsal column is divided into two fasciculi. So, the lateral fasciculus cuneatus, which siya yung pathway ng sensory pathway for your upper limbs, and your fasciculus gracilis, sensory pathway for your lower limb. So, yung mga sensory things na yun. So, vibration, deep touch, point discrimination, and proprioception, yun yung nagda-dorsal column pathway. So, for the spinothalamic tract, just take note also na sensory pathway din siya for pain, temperature, and light touch. So, yung red area dyan. So, yun yun. So, corticospinal tract naman, on the other hand, is motor. So, from the cerebral cortex to your spine, kaya corticospinal. So, basta tandaan mo lang na motor siya. So, yung middle labels. So, more on the visual part naman. So, for synaptic transmission, so di ba we have two types, the electrical, which involves gap junction, and the chemical synapse, which involves a synaptic cleft. So, this is, so what happens when there is synaptic transmission? So, when there is an action potential generated, when it goes na to your presynaptic cell, so synaptic bulb mo, yung calcium channel mo ma-activate, so papasok yung calcium. So when there's high calcium na, ma-activate mo yung vesicles mo, mag-fuse siya sa cell membrane, and then i-release niya yung neurotransmitters. So yung neurotransmitters naman ay magbabind sa receptors niya on the next sa postsynaptic cell, and then pag ma-activate siya, well, depende sa neurotransmitter mo kung nag-excite siya or nag-inhibit. So for this case, nag-excite siya. So what happens is yung sodium channel mo na-activate. So pumasok yung sodium mo sa loob. So nag-generate siya ng action potential. So tuloy-tuloy na yon. So for inhibitory naman, kunyari like glycine and GABA. So yung nangyari, pwedeng mechanism is yung chloride channel mo, yung nag-open. So pwedeng lumabas yung chloride mo, so pwede yung inhibitory. Also, opening of the potassium channel, closing of the sodium channel, and inhibition of your calcium will also inhibit the synapse. So, this is an example of a sensory neuron. So, for example, this one, so for the Pacinian corpuscle, so di ba yung function ng Pacinian corpuscle natin is for light touch and for vibration. So, what happens when you generate an action potential? So, when there is, so this is the tip of your cell process. So ito yun, magnified. So, ito yung cell membrane niya. So, yung cell membrane, nagko-contain siya ng pressure-sensitive sodium channels, potassium leaky channels, mga voltage-sensitive sodium channels, yung mga voltage-sensitive potassium channels, and yung sodium-potassium ATPase. And then, so, pag kunyari kung may stimulus tayo, so na-stretch yung lamellae ng Pacinian corpuscle natin, diba? So, magde-detect siya ng cell. So, what happens is yung pressure-sensitive sodium channel mo, so ito yun, dito pa lang tayo, diba? Resting potential. So, papasok yung sodium. So, pag merong stimulus, pero dapat enough yung stimulus mo para maka-create tayo na action potential para mag-reach sa threshold.